We are back on All Bengals. I am joined by former Pittsburgh Steeler Ryan Clark. You can see him everywhere on ESPN. Get Up, NFL Live. He's a busy guy, and he's going to join us for a little bit right now. Ryan, how you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Not too bad. I'm going to back it up just a little bit. We are looking ahead in Cincinnati to the Chargers on Sunday when they're back at Paul Brown Stadium, but 3 in a row for this Cincinnati Bengals team against the Pittsburgh Steelers. What does that mean, if anything?
I don't know. It almost made me puke a little bit when you said it, because I don't know what that feels like. I mean, I think it means the tide is changing, not only in the AFC North, but in Cincinnati. When you draft a guy like Joe Burrow, number 1 overall, you draft him to change the culture. You draft him to add belief, but you also draft him to see that come to fruition on the field. And I think they've gotten all of those things. When you watch the Cincinnati Bengals play, there is no fear, right? There's constant belief that plays will be made. And I think you're seeing that on both sides of the football. The most telling thing to me was in the first game this season, Tyler Boyd said that the Pittsburgh Steelers quit. Now, like my mama used to always say, like, them's fighting words. And the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't come out and fight. In fact, the Cincinnati Bengals took the fight to them, whether it was the physicality in the run game with Joe Mixon and that offensive line, or if it was T. Higgins jumping on top of James Pierre's head to catch go balls, or if it was Joe Burrow on the first touchdown, making a move on a free safety and getting the ball in the end zone. The Cincinnati Bengals were the more confident team. They were the more physical team. They were the team that played with the greater sense of urgency. And I think that's a huge deal when you think about the historic legacies of both teams.
Joe Burrow has officially played a full NFL regular season. Obviously, rookie year was cut short due to injury. What are some of your thoughts on when you watch Burrow on tape right now?
I mean, first off, you got to remember where I first saw him. I lived 20 minutes, from Tiger Stadium. And, all of those things that made you love him as a fan and as an alum, you still feel and you still see when you watch him play now. I think the first thing that stands out to me is the toughness. Joe Burrow is the guy that doesn't give up on football plays. Joe Burrow is a guy that doesn't take the easy way out. You're talking about a man that had a horrific knee injury last year, and he's still standing in the pocket, staring down the barrel and making huge throws down the field. He still isn't scared to get outside of the pocket and fight for extra yards. And, with some of that, you're going to have games like Chicago where you might get interceptions, right? You're going to have certain throws that he makes, and you say, you know what, maybe that's one he shouldn't have tried. But when you believe in yourself, when you're constantly putting pressure on the defense, when you want to push the ball down the football field and you want to win football games, you're going to live with some of those things when you have a talent like Joe Burrow, when you have a leader like him at the quarterback position. And I think he's a star. I think he's a dude that's an all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber player in the future. He's going to make a hell of a lot of money with the way these quarterback contracts are being given out. And I think he'll have an opportunity to win a Super Bowl in Cincinnati. And that's the reason he was drafted.
The NFL is a comparison game, especially in the quarterback room. They have the Chargers coming to town, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow. If you were a GM right now of an NFL team, who are you building a franchise around?
I think it depends on what things are most important to you. When you look at Justin Herbert, you see the size, you see the arm strength, you see the ability to run. I think some of the measurables and some of the tangible things are there, and they may be a step above where Joe Burrow's are. And then you look at now Joe Burrow can run, right? Joe Burrow can obviously throw. He can do those things at a very high level as well. That's why you go number 1 overall. But for me, it's the leadership, right? For me, it's the toughness. And if I'm building a team, I pick Joe Burrow because I believe, unlike any other young quarterback in this league, he has the most Tom Brady-like stuff. And I know that's something that's hard to quantify. And we didn't know Tom Brady had it when he was picked 199th overall. But as you watch it going forward, as you watch the way teammates rally around Tom Brady, as you watch the way Tom Brady changes cultures of locker rooms, which we didn't know he could do until he went to Tampa. I think Joe Burrow is that exact same type of player, but he's a step above what Tom Brady is as an athlete. And when you look at that and when you get to watch his journey of not always being the chosen one, right? Not being the 5-star who gets to start when he walks on Ohio State's campus, not being the guy who automatically wins the quarterback battle, fighting through that, becoming a Heisman winner, being the first overall pick, dealing with those expectations, and in my opinion, exceeding them both with his play on the field and his leadership in the locker room. I think Joe Burrow has to be the guy I'd start a franchise around.
As a former Pittsburgh Steeler, you're familiar with the Carson Palmer offense, the Andy Dalton offense. And then you look what Joe Burrow has just in the last 2 games alone. They've been able to balance their offense. Joe Mixon on the ground. You get a guy like Jamar Chase, wide receiver T. Higgins starting to light up, and Tyler Boyd. Where would you put this offense right now compared to maybe past offenses in Cincinnati?
You know, the Carson offense was explosive. One, because you had Chad Johnson. Having Ocho Cinco was just different. You know, there was the time in the league where you would speak of him not just only amongst the elite, but amongst the best wide receivers in the game. And so I think you're starting to get closer to that. I think this is better than any Andy Dalton offense because I just think you're more dynamic at the quarterback position. Jamar Chase is obviously a star as your number 1 receiver, but you know, honestly, when Jamar was drafted, even though like I've known Jamar since he was 15. I coached Jamar in high school, and you know, I knew what type of player he could be, but I was like, no, you got to get Sewell. You got to protect Joe Burrow. But the reason I said that was because I looked at T. Higgins, who was a 2nd-round draft pick last year, and I was like, that's a 1st-round talent. That's a guy who can also be a star at the position. But with what they've assembled on the outside, obviously having a guy like Joe Mixon in the backfield, and now this offensive line coming along and creating the creases and also giving the protection that this team needs, I think it's starting to look like that TJ Houshmandzadeh, that, you know, Ocho Cinco, Carson Palmer offense, which a lot of people probably don't even remember. The year the Pittsburgh Steelers win the Super Bowl, they don't win the division because it's the Cincinnati Bengals who do. And if not for a injury early on in the wild card game, it could be a different story for both Pittsburgh and Cincinnati.
Look to the defensive side right now. Everybody talks about the narrative with Cincinnati. They don't spend money in free agency. 2 years in a row, they started to load up on the defense. A lot of free agents. A former Pittsburgh Steeler, Mike Hilton, with that pick 6 on Sunday.
Yeah.
Think about this defense right now.
I think the defense has just dramatically improved. I think, you know, even you're talking about the free agent pickups, but a guy like Jesse Bates, I think is one of the more underrated free safeties in the league. You have Awuzie on the outside. You also have Eli Apple, who has been cast off from all of these different places, who is playing good football. You mentioned Mike Hilton already. I think he's a steadying force at that nickel position. He can rush the passer and blitz, right? He's a guy who's not scared to tackle, and we obviously know what he can do in coverage. But when you go out and you get a dude like Trey Hendrickson, you know, I think he's one of those people that if you don't love the Saints, right, or if you don't love the Bengals, you truly don't have an appreciation for how good he actually is, how much of a menace he is as a pass rusher. And if you watch the Cincinnati Bengals and you're not going to talk about Logan Wilson, then you are absolutely derelict in your job, right? He's a guy who shined the entire year. And so I think this defense has improved tremendously. I think they're a huge reason why they win some of these football games. And I think they're put together and pieced together from a skill set standpoint in a way that can be sustainable down the stretch of this season.
Zac Taylor, young coach, he's in year 3 right now. It's been a wild ride for him, but Joe Burrow has shown that he appreciates Taylor and they have a really close relationship. What do you think Zac Taylor's been able to do just over his short time in Cincinnati?
Well, I think one thing is, you know, you mentioned Cincinnati spending money or drafting or whatever you may say. They started to give him the players, right? This team didn't have that level of talent when he took over the job, which is why it's probably scary to take over a job in Cincinnati. You never know if you're quite going to get the things in your locker room that you need, but you hit it out of the park with the drafting of Joe Burrow, and now they develop a relationship. I think also part of that relationship was the way Joe Burrow came in as a professional, but Zac Taylor also having that confidence and giving and starting that relationship. That's a relationship, right? Where he's not talking at Joe Burrow, they're speaking with one another. And I think that's extremely important to empower your quarterback, but also when your best player or most important player in Joe Burrow respects your coach in that way, the other team follows suit. And so now you're starting to see him kind of put his imprint on his team, Zac Taylor, and his and kind of make the culture that he wants it to be. And the sky is truly the limit for this team if they could continue to develop talent, continue to acquire talent, and then have Zac Taylor do the right things and putting them in the right place to succeed on the field.
This team is 5-2 in the AFC right now. You're familiar with the AFC North Baltimore Ravens. They were a favorite going in to win the division, but the Bengals are one game behind them right now. If you were to look towards the end of the season right now, who do you think is going to win this division?
I mean, I think so here's the hard part. When you look at the Baltimore Ravens, they struggle so much in games, but they have Lamar Jackson, you know, and it's like setting up a bat signal at some point, Batman coming in and saving the day. You know, even in the game, he throws 4 interceptions last week. They find a way to win because he makes plays to do that. But I think when you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, the perplexing thing is this. You dominated the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. You've beaten the Pittsburgh Steelers twice. And then you play the Cleveland Browns and you're like, oh, okay, right? And then you play the New York Jets and you're like, ugh, you know? And so what Cincinnati has to find is that consistency. And if you can get that consistent play from them, when you look at them as a complete roster, they're probably the best team right now as when you look at the injuries and where the rosters are in the AFC North. But it's going to be about going out and not being that young team, right? Not being that upstart team that you can't expect the same thing from every single week. And I think if they can do that, this team finds themselves in the playoffs.
Ryan Clark, one of the best follows on Twitter. Make sure you get out there. And he's all over ESPN. He's a busy guy, and he joined us for a little bit right now. I can't thank you enough for joining us over on All Bengals.
Yes, ma'am. No problem. Thank you so much.